This IB film comparative study will be focusing on the two films Mad God, directed by Phil Tippett, and The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, directed by Isao Takahata. The film focus will be in regards to how the film genre of animation allows for highly imaginative forms of expression and representation of concepts and ideas. Animation films utilize artistic depictions of objects and concepts in a large variety of techniques and styles. Additionally, these films can subvert reality through these artistic depictions and allow for the imagination of the artist to give life to unrealistic worlds of wonder. These animated films are powerful examples of how animation allows for a borderline boundless form of communication, as Mad God, being the brainchild and personal project of Phil Tippett after 30 years of production, presents a confusing and truly awful world of masterful stop-motion production in which, as the name suggests, a mad god ravages humanity, creating an apocalyptic world of death and cruelty. This film, with its philosophy of pushing the visual boundaries of stop-motion animation as the creative work of Phil, well exemplifies how the artistic liberties of animation can produce highly unique and stylized visual representations of concepts and ideas. The second film, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, is a Japanese film produced by Studio Ghibli, which follows a strange, magical girl born of a bamboo shoot, who struggles with the difficulty of wanting to live a peaceful, humble existence in nature while having unfortunately been born of godlike descent and having unfortunately inherited a status of royalty. This film, directly opposing the philosophy of incredible visual expansion and creation, utilizes lots of empty space and minimalistic elements to create emphasis on certain emotions and themes. Both films utilize artistic techniques and unique visual depictions to convey and/or emphasize certain messages, philosophies, and tones. Mad God was meant to be a personal project for Phil Tippett, a flexing of his artistic muscles. It is a stop-motion marvel, meant as a love letter to the craft. As in his own words, Phil Tippett states, "It's about making things. I wanted to do something without the trappings of story and plot. There's a narrative, but it's not a story per se, and Mad God is the antithesis of my day job, where there's a lot of filmmaking rules. I thought of it like a painting that I would work on for a long period of time, maybe shoot something over here and something over there, and not really know exactly how they were going to link. And paint he did. Because he chose not to have a plot, he instead used this lack of conventions to truly push the boundaries of visual possibilities, to make things. Because of this lack of conventions, the world of Mad God is ever expanding in order to improve upon its visual prowess and creativity, seldom if ever elaborating or justifying itself. An example of this rapid expansion is the scene in which there are giant humanoid creatures being shocked using electric chairs, emptying their bowels through holes in said chairs, which the product was funneled through a mixture of a mechanical and organic system of tubes, which would ultimately result in the creation of zombie-like creatures who seem to be enslaved by something, expendable by that same something, often casually being killed in workplace accidents as a fact of their lives, working for some unexplained purpose and towards some unexplained goal. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is almost Mad God's creative and aesthetic opposite, allowing the audience to fill in the wide gaps the artists intentionally left within the visuals. This unsung film from Studio Ghibli is often overshadowed by Ghibli's more expansive and visually boundless films, such as the acclaimed Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and Howl's Moving Castle, to name a few. Based on traditional Japanese sumi-e watercolor paintings, and in opposition to the incredible detail of these films as well as Mad God, this film thrives on its level of abstraction and empty space, utilizing these factors to emphasize the emotional impact of scenes, to emphasize the artistic aspects of the work, to stimulate the mind about the wonder of what could be. The lack of elements heavily emphasizes what is being depicted, helping to not draw the viewer's attention away from the most significant elements. It also forces the imagination of the viewer to develop itself what it may believe to fill that space, adding a layer of beauty to the film as it helps the viewer appreciate the beauty and vibrance of their own world. Additionally, the level of abstraction, or lack of realism, in addition to the borderline lack of mise-en-scène, consistently reminds the viewer that the film isn't merely a fictitious world, but rather a work of a creative group of minds developing and narrating a story in an attempt to teach or enlighten the audience about something they may not have known or appreciated before. Regarding mise-en-scène, Mad God, as it is a film with many a great detail, always has something to display to drive immersion into this world of Tippett's mind, whether visual, audible, or incredibly subtle. Unlike The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, Mad God is very visually grounded, which only minimizes the possibilities of creativity in regards to techniques that could possibly be utilized in the creation of the film, though this concreteness Tippett used to his advantage, putting all of his effort towards feeding the mise-en-scène and subsequent immersion for the audience. In regards to visuals, if the first example wasn't enough, when the assassin is being lowered into the world below, the levels that are passing by and upwards are depicted comprehensively. When the assassin finally exits the pod that he was lowered with, the world around him is also fully realized, filled with chaos, evil, and violence, making it truly feel as if he was exploring some crazed alien place. All of the smaller elements collectively help to set this tone. For example, the chain of murder that the assassin witnesses and the psychotic hotel that he sees with his binoculars. Audibly, this film also proved it could absolutely immerse the audience into the tones of themes in chaos, death, and cruelty in the scene in which the assassin is being dissected alive, the clocks around him hand ticking eerily loudly and rhythmically as he goes insane from the pain, eyes bloodshot. Every following moment in this film somehow manages to be equally more traumatizing and imaginative than the last, and the mise-en-scène as a product from the passion of Phil Tippett only helps to further deliver these perceptions. As The Tale of the Princess Kaguya does lack mise-en-scène quite a bit in terms of having a great level of detail, the lack of elements helps to emphasize the already existing ones in frame. Additionally, the techniques utilized by the artists help to, rather than convey to the audience a visually immersive experience by the same means as Mad God or the other films by Studio Ghibli in which they exploit the concreteness and soundness of their visuals, emphasize certain tones and emotions by means of the abstractness of the animation style. For example, charcoal lines are the only real means of making objects concrete in this film. Without them, everything would be free and light. In their near absence, the visuals seem lighthearted and calming, as well as joyous and open, which is intelligently taken advantage of by the artists to emphasize these emotions in correlation to Kaguya's own joy and lightheartedness, when surrounded by the humble world of nature she desperately desires compared to the greater concreteness of the reality of being imprisoned by her royal status she is constantly trying to escape from throughout the film. Additionally, the charcoal lines are meant to add an abstract sense of texture, of fuzziness, to elements and characters within the film, and the watercolors meant to allow for soft, subtle depictions of color throughout the film. These visual techniques are also meant to further emphasize the fact that this is an artistic piece, not an existing world, but a tale woven by the artists themselves, a form of self-expression from the team. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya also utilizes its charcoal lines and its high level of abstraction in different ways. For example, when it uses more aggressive and erratic strokes when Kaguya is running away from the capital as a result of ridicule from others for trying to be a person of nobility whilst having such humble beginnings to emphasize Kaguya's frustration with her life, exemplifying her desperation to go back home to enjoy the life with her friends and family and the natural beauty of the mountains she longed for, as well as her struggle with identity, as all of her attempts to impress and fulfill her father at this time are failing, implying she was unfairly ripped from the life she desired for nothing. The eclectic minds of both Takahata and Ghibli well employed the level of abstraction of this film to compensate for any possible value missing as a result of the lack of visual elements to help emphasize emotions, tones, and themes. Though both films have a very large artistic and developmental difference, they both utilize the extent of creativity allowed by the genre of film they're a part of, using their own powerful forms of animation to explore differing concepts by different visual and storytelling techniques and philosophies.